Hey guys, welcome back to SLT Learning, and this is Ankit Prajapati, and today we're gonna cover another question on API testing and researcher side. So if you're preparing for QA automation interview, if you're experienced or fresher candidate, I would suggest the API is one of the crucial topics for any QA related interviews. So just go through this list of questions, and these are the questions that we get from our candidate who appear from the real interviews. So we try to collect all those information, and we try to put the description and the syntax of that interview questions in front of you, so you can answer in a better way. Okay, so let's we see what we're gonna do today. Okay, so how do you debug API request failing with the API response with the 500 error? Okay, so couple of things you can need to check over here. So how do you debug if the API is failing with the response code of 500? And 500 is mostly come when it is a something related with the server side. Okay, 5 accessible response will come from the server side. So first things I will just say is, when API request failed with 500 internal server error, it means something went wrong on the server side, but as a tester or an engineer you consider still approach debugging systematically. So even though you know this is the server side issue, but as a tester you should test this particular API systematically. You try to debug in a proper approach, so you need to answer like that way. First things, if I receive the 500 error in my API response code, I will make sure if it is a consistent or it is a one-off or two-off kind of error. Okay, because sometimes let's suppose if when you are performing the API testing and some service the developer or the cloud engineer has restarted, so for that specific time you will receive that error, but if you run that API again you might be have successful. So do not consider or do not conclude if you receive the 500 error, do not conclude it is a some issue with the API. Try to rerun the API and see if the error is consistent or intermediate. Okay, that is the first thing. So confirm the failure first. Try to do multiple to try to do the see the inspect mode, see what exactly is happening on the UI side as well. Okay, and then conclude if it is a constant failure, or you can consider it as a bug, or it is an intermediate. Then check the request. Okay, endpoint is correct, the whatever the URL that you are using are correct as per the API documentation, as per the format, as per the syntax. Sometimes we do this common mistake, some typos, some spelling. Instead of products we use product, we missing the S in the API call. So those kind of things you need to make sure, right, you are using the correct HTTP method as well. So suppose you have the endpoint for the post call, but over here you have used the get call. Okay, you passing the response body, a request body and everything, but over here instead of passing through the get call you are instead of passing through the post call you are passing through the get call. So those kind of things you need to check from your side as a tester, rather than submitting that information to the QA developer and they identify your mistake. Try to understand from your side. Okay, so make sure you have the proper endpoint in the URL, make sure you have the proper headers are added as per the API documentation. Make sure your request body contain the valid information, required fields and the data type as per the defined schema in the API documentation. Make sure the query parameters or path parameters that you are passing are valid or within the expected limit or not. So these are the common few checklist, few the preliminary steps that you need to perform as a QA from your side when you are debugging the 500 error of API. Okay, then review the API documentation. I will just say review the API documentation at the time of the checking this kind of stuff. Okay, verify if the payload and the parameter align with the latest API specs. Sometimes the API version also get these particular things. Okay, so if you are testing the latest API, you just make sure you are referring to the latest API documentation as well. Check for the deprecated values and the new mandatory fields. So sometimes in the API version, okay, in the previous API you will remove you have some of the field which is duplicated in the new API, or in a new API you have added some mandatory fields, the new mandatory fields. So those kind of the things you need to review in your API documentations, then go through with the checklist, then confirm it is a failure, and then check the server log or the backend log. Always ask as a QA, right, you should always ask the developer or your team that provide the access of the servers, So you can read the server log, you can read the DB logs if required, and you can try to narrow down the problem from your side before raising to the developer. Because as a QA, it is not your responsibility only to raise a bug. You need to raise a proper bug with the proper information. Okay, and for that one, server logs and the backend log is always required. So always ask the access for those kind of logs and try to go through the logs and try to capture the common readable error and copy paste that in your bug. When you create the bug, try to copy paste that log information as well. If the bug is consistent and is happening all the times, even though you are providing the proper API endpoint, headers, request body, but still the issue is there, then try to read the logs and capture the log information and put in your bug that you raise. Okay, then try minimal payload. So sometimes in few of the API, right, like let's suppose there is one of the API that I was testing to create the container. Okay, so there are around 20 21 or 22 fields that we need to pass, but out of that 22 fields there are 7 to 8 fields are mandatory. Okay, so when you debugging that particular kind of error like 500 error, to try to send the API calls with the minimum mandatory information in your request body. Okay, then gradually increase the field by field. If 6 field is passing, then try to include the 7th values, then 8th value. So like that way you can also understand which values or which field is causing the issue if it is not consistent. Okay, so try to minimum your payload and capture the error, identify the causing of the error getting from which field. Okay, then isolate the environment issue. Sometimes the API work fine on QA, but it is not working on staging. So try to see the same request on a different environment and make sure the API is failing throughout the environments, or it is only having the issue on the QA or the dev environment. Okay, if it is work in one and fail in other, that means the issue with the environment configuration. It could be the DB connection, or it could be the service dependency, or it could be the data that are available in the database. Okay, so couple of things. So another things what you can do, isolate the environment issues, then check the dependencies. 500 errors mainly happen when DB query failed. Okay, violation timeout, external API or service dependencies down, file path, upload path or permission is are not incorrect. So this kind of the dependency you need to check if the database service are up and running and your query is proper. If you run that query in SQL database directly, it should work fine. You should not time out. The external API, suppose you are working with some external third-party APIs, so just make sure their service or their response is consistent. If it is down, then your API is going to fail eventually and it should be the 500 error. Then sometimes when you have your couple of files on server, right, at that time the permission, you need to always make sure you provide the proper permission to access the file. Okay, so these are the dependency you should check when you are debugging the 500 error: DB queries fields, external API, and the file upload path permission. Then use the API response details. Some API include extra information, so try to use the API response detail as well. So sometimes if your developer are good enough and they have put proper information in kind of the 500 error, like error, internal server error, and details, this is null reference exception in user service. So you will see those kind of information as well in your response, which you can use to create the bug as well. Okay, then reproduce with the test data. Use known good test data to see if the data specific issue or not, and if it is work in one of the user ID but fail for another user ID, then data for that record might be corrupted. Okay, so this can be happen. This could be the related with data as well that you are passing in your payload or in your request body. So try to reproduce with a different set of data. First always keep the good test data with you, which mainly have in API documentation. So if your data is failing, then try to use the standard data which has been passed every time, or you can take the information from the unit test that has been done by developer from their side. Ask them, give me your payload, I want to pass your payload and see if it is working or not. So those kind of practice you can do, but do the proper analysis, proper troubleshooting, proper debugging from your side, before raising anything to the developer. This is not related with API only, this is for your general UI bug as well. Before raising to the developer, make sure the bug is reproducible, bug is consistent, you are able to reproduce the bug in front of the developer anytime. Then and then raise a bug, and then put the proper information, guys. So if you receive 500 error in your API response, this is how you can debug. These are the different parameters you can consider in your troubleshooting, guys. Okay, so if you like this video, please subscribe to our channel, and please forward this video to your colleagues if they are preparing for the QA automation interviews. And thank you for watching again, and keep learning and keep cracking the interviews, guys.